Are you ready to start living a more confident, successful, and safe life, regardless of what's going on in the world or what has happened in your past? Then you're at the right place at the right time. The FemVincible Podcast, where we bring you content and guests to help you focus on moving forward as the powerful you that you were truly meant to be. So welcome to FemVincible. Hey, here we are. Good morning, everybody. Sorry you caught me still being chatterly with my guest today. Our guest, because she's your guest too, right? I mean, you're letting her into your home on your phone, on your computer, which is awesome. Thanks for being here this morning. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about some very cool stuff. If you saw my post talking about who was going to be on here, I kind of suggested that Sara here has quite the story. And, it really, I'm happy that the people that come on to the podcast with me do have great stories. And I say great, not because it means all fun, happy rainbows and unicorns. It's the crazy stuff that happens that sometimes leave us marked and scarred and thinking differently. And still, we come through and, find some good in life and find some happiness and stuff. And that's one of the big reasons I wanted to do the podcast like I do it, because I want all of you who watch to see the possibilities of getting through something terrible that happened, whether it was last year or, when you were 2 or 3 years old, because it is possible. But sure enough, we don't always feel like it, do we? Even after we feel like we're healing, a lot of times we can end up feeling kind of poopy, like we're right back where we were. But, healing's never over, right? So we just keep on doing it and stay on our journey. So yeah, I'm very excited to have Sara Smith today, who is the co-founder of the Living Free from Fear movement. And she's also an advocate for violence survivors. And she's a thriver, a violence thriver herself, which if you haven't heard that word, of course you've heard that word because you listen to me, you've probably looked at my website, and I want everyone to not just survive, I want you to thrive and have a great life, right? So anyway, I'm super excited to have you here, Sara. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's going to be a good talk today. And I think what I'd like to start with, if you looked at my post, and why do I say that? Anyway, of course you did. We're going to talk about transformation and expansion. And I had some of that because we just had Thanksgiving, which means I had the wrong kind of expansion, but I didn't know where to do it like I usually do. So look at that.
Progress.
Yeah. So Sara, your story, I mean, I've heard it, when you and I met, and it's quite the story, and your growth from it is just incredible. And it amazes me to see how buoyant and alive and in love with life you are after some of the stuff you went through. And I mean, let's just give everybody a little preview of kind of what we're going to get into as we talk about this.
Yeah, I think a nice place to start, or a nice transition from what you just said, is something that the advocate I worked with, whom you know as well, Karen Messina, who you've had on the podcast. She loves the story, and I kind of love it too, because it was such a pivotal time for me when I got away from my abuser and I kind of started my life in a space that I could, grow and move past and understand things and not be in that, flight or fight. And so the moment was, Karen assisted me, and some local communities assisted me in getting my first apartment. That was, you had to have a code to get in the building. It was very safe. It was, young professionals and older people. And I was on like the 4th floor. And some friends of mine helped me move in, and I had the bare minimum at the time, but we like put my bed together and I bought pizza and wings for everybody and everyone left. And the next morning when I opened my eyes, I was just thankful for a ceiling. And it seems so small to some people, but you know, every apartment I had ever had, he broke into and would destroy my things. And, you know, every car I had, you know, every friend's house, he knew where it was. And, you know, so nothing felt safe for me ever. You know, I was couch surfing. I was going from county to county every couple of days, living out of my car with my dogs and going to different people's houses just to stay safe. And when I woke up that morning, I was just like, this is my ceiling. I have a ceiling, you know, this is the new beginning for me. And that really was the pivotal point for me to continue to grow. And as I was telling you before we started the podcast, I don't even call it growth anymore. I call it expansion. You know, when you've gotten to a certain point, you just feel like you're expanding as an individual. And that's the place I'm at now.
You know, it's pretty amazing to think of how small something like having your own ceiling is, you know. But I mean, when you have had your personal space taken away and not just body sovereignty, but I guess space sovereignty, you know, that you haven't been allowed to have your own for so long. And every time, I mean, even as you're kind of on the run, hiding, you know, staying with friends and family, I mean, to have your own safe space is huge. And so many people just, we kind of take that terrific thing that we have, a safe place to sleep and eat and use the bathroom, take it a little bit for granted, don't we?
Talk about hypervigilance. Not only did I not trust every environment I was ever in, you know, because he came to my work, he came to my school, he came to my friends' houses. I didn't even trust myself. I'm in flight or fight, so I'm not making proper decisions, or I'm so clouded in my judgment from the manipulation and the chaos. I didn't even trust myself. So I, you know, talk about body sovereignty. I didn't even trust who I was. You feel broken, as we all love to say to ourselves in these situations, we're broken. Right. And I've learned to no longer say that. None of us are ever broken. We are born whole. We are continually whole. There's nothing broken about us. There's nothing that needs to be fixed. It's an expansion of who we are and how we relate to things in this world. So
we kind of jumped right by a preview. We're in the story. Which is cool for me. I'm fine with it.
They're cohesive.
Yeah. And I tell you, that thing where you don't trust yourself, you know, I mean, we talk about sometimes, whether it's, you know, when I'm on here by myself or some of the guests we've talked about, you know, trauma or abuse isn't always just physical. You know, there's that mental and psychological twisting that happens a lot of time, so that not only are you not trusting yourself, you're not even trusting your memory of what happened or why it happened. And what a bizarre thing to happen to us, where we, because of the way a person treated us, that we believed in, that now we're even checking ourselves, you know, am I right? Did that happen? Did I cause that? Was that my fault? Did I remember that right? And it's terrible.
Was I dreaming it? Was I putting two things together that weren't the same thing? Like you're trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together and none of them have the shapes that need to go together, is really how it feels. And, you know, you don't trust anyone because you think people think you're crazy because they're just like, is this happening? What? This person to me seems confident. This person to me, I go to her for advice and this is what's happening in her life. That can't be right. Like, so you know, that's really the environment you're in. And I hid it for a long time. A very long time.
I just had a terrific metaphor show up in my head when you were talking about putting the pieces together.
Yeah.
I'm like, an abuser will take your puzzle pieces and cut off all the little knobs.
Yeah.
So that now you're like, do these really go together? You know, because
Is this
they've
the
cut
same
all-
box, or is this two puzzles?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
there's the weird FemVincible metaphor of the month. Narcissists cut off your puzzle knobs.
Puzzle knobs.
I don't even know what those things are called. Now they're called puzzle knobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They change your puzzle shapes.
Yeah. Yep. They litter in your puzzle box.
Yep. Perfect. Perfect.
So with all that going on, I know that we talked a little bit, well, before, about what you do, the things you think about, your habits. Those are who you are. And so if you talk about those a little bit and how those feed into your transformation and your expansion of who you are, I would think expansion of who you are is actually back into expanding back into the true you.
Yes.
We collapse down with trauma and stuff, don't we?
Yeah, that, and you're afraid of the true you. You're not sure if you're going to be accepted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it has a lot to do with loving yourself, which is not something that comes natural for most people, you know, so.
Especially after stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely. You know, that's really you have the foundation, or most people have a foundation, even if you weren't given it in childhood. You're a human being and you just have your DNA gives you natural abilities. But then someone comes and pours this concrete on top of it, and you have to find a way to be like, that's not right. I know that's not right. I know I have rights. I know that I can't feel like I can speak because I'm being threatened. I'm not safe in this. And, you know, my brain doesn't feel right. So to me, I'm going to listen to my gut, but how do I actually do the action if I'm being forced to not do it? And I don't know how, still to this day, you know, for me, I'm very connected to nature and the universe. And we were talking about spirituality. I'm very connected in that way. And, you know, in some ways, I think that innate nature allowed me to trust something and say to myself, well, if I have a job still, I can still support myself to a degree. And yes, I'm going to struggle. So through all of it, I still maintained a job. You know, even though I wasn't performing, you know, the therapist I was seeing at the time was like, if you just sit in your seat and you're doing 60%, you know, you'll be fine. You don't have to do 100%, mm-hmm. you know, and, you know, going into a women's shelter for a little while, it's like they have certain time frames you have to be there. And I'm like, I still have to go to work every day, you know, and they wouldn't even let me leave at the time frame. And I'm like, this isn't going to work.
That's not so.
Right. You know, and that really was the caveat for me to say, how can I make change? The services available aren't even close. As we all know, the laws are, you know, terrible. And we have a long way to go. You know, you do see the positive results, you know, that there are shelters now that take pets, you know, because you want to take your pets with you. You're worried about them. You know, things like that. So we have made progress, but, you know, the funding is just never there either. Right. So, you know, the thing for me was I was in this place where most of the women, you know, had a drug problem, had multiple kids from multiple, you know, fathers, didn't have a job. They were on assistance. And here I was, you know, and I'm white. Most of them were, you know, Hispanic, Black, you know, and it's almost like people didn't believe me. They're like, but she's white. Yeah. Like it can't happen to someone who is white and educated. You know, they're like, oh, you have a college degree. No. Yeah. They're like, you have a car. Yeah. You know, and so then when I showed them,
anybody, right?
It was like I had to convince them, and I'm like, am I on Mars? Like, what's happening? Like, it was just like the words coming out, no one was listening, you know? And so when I pull out the folder with 33 arrest warrants, that he had been arrested 33 times,
Mhm.
that's when people started listening, you know? And they're just like, and so that's disturbing to me, you know? Out of those, I always think about that, you know, out of those 33 times, I could have been killed. And the last time it was very close to that. And then you meet people and you diminish that. I met people who were shot in the head. I met people who were stabbed, you know, and I'm like, oh, well, my situation wasn't that bad. That's
Oh
not
my
true.
gosh. We just talked about that last week,
Yeah.
you know, about you can't compare your trauma, no matter how whatever
Yeah.
is valid for you. You know,
Yeah.
you don't get to shut it down because yours wasn't as bad as person X, Y, Z, you know, or because your earlier situation was worse than, or better than, or, you know.
I
Yeah, but
really didn't understand until, you know, I would say my early 40s,
yeah,
that it was related to more than just the situational things that I went through in my life. I realized it was the lack of foundation when I was a child.
yeah,
So it took until my 40s to understand those things were related. I went through amazing therapy. I had an amazing trauma therapist that I met after my abuser went to jail. You know, she was phenomenal. She worked with PTSD. She worked at the VA with, PTSD patients from the military. You know, she was phenomenal and got me to a great space. But I always dealt with, okay, this is what happened to me and I'm fixing it now. I never, that lack of foundational stuff when you're a child, you know, has everything to do with the decisions that you make or the person that you are, or, you know, things like that. So, yeah.
yeah. Oh, I want to go back to something. Everybody,
Yeah.
you may have, you know, when Sarah was talking about, you know, oh, it can happen to you. You have a degree, you have a car, you're white, you know. It's one of those crazy things. And men are bad about this a lot because we don't have the same grasp of the situation that women do. We don't walk around most days worried about the guy in the parking lot or the guy that's on the street or who is it that's knocking on my door. Are they going to push into my home? You know, we don't generally live with that. And so a lot of times that's why men in positions of authority, you know, will, you know, think of things like a women's center and not want to give it funding because they're like, is the problem really that bad? You
Yeah.
know, and again, they'll think about it as, oh, it's for, you know, the minorities in our area, the minorities. It's for those who, you know, are living in poverty. It's like, that's not the only people. I mean, there are women driving Maseratis and Ferraris and sitting in the back of limousines that have drivers that have been traumatized and abused and held down, you know, spiritually, psychologically, and emotionally. So yeah, there is no demographic border
None.
for who gets abused or
None.
who gets violated. So yeah, don't ever let that be in your head. The numbers are horribly high for the entire planet, for all the women on the planet, you know, and
Yeah.
it frustrates me. Sarah, I want to ask, what were some of the things that you started doing that helped you have growth, to help you, you know, like we were talking about, the things that you do, your daily habits are who you are. So what did you start doing after all that to expand into the who you are now, where you're happy to be alive again, you're happy to be out and travel, and you're okay to, you know, go hiking and such? What are some of those things that, I mean, other people might hear that you did and they're going to go, well, shoot, I should try that.
Absolutely. You know, it's a conflicting battle in your head for a while. You know, I found that routine was something that helped me. You know, and I'm such a free spirit, routine to me is like, huh? You know,
Don't
like,
pinch me in.
yeah, exactly. Like, I'm such a free spirit. I'm like, routine. I can't even get up the same time every day. I'm late to everything. Like, you know, like, so for me, it wasn't a strict routine. It was just the things I put in my daily life is it moving me in the direction that I want to go? I ask myself that a lot. We all are, go out shopping and we have a budget and we look at something and we're like, oh, I really want that, but it's on my budget, so you have that little thing in your head. So now when I go clothes shopping, let's say, if I don't love it, I don't buy it. So where I am in my life now, it's like, I don't analyze things because the perfectionist was what kind of got me into a space. Well, if I can't do it the right way, I'm not going to do it at all. That's such a negative connotation. Well, you know what? I spent money on this thing this week, so I'm not going to take myself to the movies. So I would punish myself.
Yeah.
And was just very negative to myself all the time, like, well, look how bad you are with this. Like, no, you shouldn't enjoy yourself this weekend. You should just sit around and do nothing.
That pandemic has been going on forever, right? The pandemic,
Yeah.
perfectionism, self-punishment. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm guilty. I didn't get my vaccine. I'm still dealing with it.
Absolutely. So going through trauma, the trauma therapy with a specialized trauma therapist, she was teaching me mindfulness. And, I'm going to say woohoo, because I was thinking to myself, you can't just think yourself out of things. You know what I mean? I come from a family we're depressed and did nothing about it. And it's in my DNA. And, here I went through this. It's going to be like this the rest of my life, I really got to a space where she taught me mindfulness. Like, you're always saying, I'm never, or it's always, and you have to stop using those words, the shoulda, coulda, woulda. I don't even ever, those don't even exist in my vocabulary anymore.
Yeah.
I haven't said those in years.
Yeah. Don't keep shooting on yourself.
Yes. So I just don't say those. Even when I journal, I freehand journal almost every day. That is very therapeutic. There's science behind the fact, instead of typing on a computer, actually taking a pen to paper has a biological health benefit to it. And I've been doing that since my 20s. So, really understanding what works for you and try it. And it's like I tell people, because you're really going through whatever you want to label it. It's trauma, it's depression, it's anxiety, it's social, anxiety. It's so many things on so many levels. So just take the label off of it. Just become one with your body. How are you feeling? What do you hear? What do you smell? What are you touch? You know what I mean? Get yourself out of that space and put yourself in the present. What can happen? Don't think about it. What did happen? Stop thinking about it. Where am I today? Am I safe? Yes. Am I loved? Yes. Am I, do I have a job? Yes. Do I have a safe place to live? Yes. Do I have food on the table? Yes. So for me, it was remembering that, getting out of that space. And I sat in the driveway in my car and I wouldn't be able to just go out of the driveway. I would just sit there for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. I just couldn't do it. And she taught me the 5 deep breaths, and that actually changes the chemistry in your brain to calm you. It decreases your heart rate, has more blood flowing in your body, all of those things, push against your, your vagus nerve we talk about. All of that changes your brain chemistry. And I didn't know the science. And now that I know the science, it helped me. Again, I'm broken. I came from this family. I've been abused. I'm just always going to be this person. There was a stigma. So really just reframing it. It's not easy. I still work on it every day, every day. But the kinder I talk to myself, kinder, it doesn't matter if I didn't get everything on my to-do list done today. It doesn't mean I failed for the day. Did I have movement today? How am I feeling today? I still have amazing friends around me. So really when I say routine, that's what I mean. Am I feeding myself well to feel good? Food is fuel. If you feel good, it helps you go through life feeling better. If you are diagnosed with depression or you're diagnosed with anxiety or PTSD, can medication help you? Of course it can. But I also think it's a tool like anything else. I think if you're taking a medication and you're not going to therapy, it's a huge disservice you're giving to yourself. A pill is not going to solve everything for you. And you
Right.
may need to be on it the rest of your life. Everyone is different. For me, medication never worked for me. They tried the Prozac, they tried the anti-anxiety, they tried the Zoloft, that nothing ever worked for me. And I'm like, it just makes me feel worse. It makes me feel muted. It makes me sick to my stomach. This one made me gain weight. You know what I mean? Like none of them made me feel better anyway. So why would I be doing that to myself? So when I talk about, we were talking about that transformation. So the thinking, where I am now is the expansion. What are the things I'm passionate about? What makes me feel good about me? What makes me feel good about the world? What makes me feel like I'm making a difference in my community? I get out in nature every day. I have the sun on my face. I put my feet in the grass. It's a little cold right now because it's 30 degrees, but I went hiking yesterday. You know what I mean? So I'm out in nature. I made food for people on Thanksgiving. When you give. I don't have a lot of money, but can I make a dinner for someone else and give it to them because I live alone? Of course I can. Can I give $50 to the local charity? Can I, volunteer to help kids, learn English that are just moved to the area or something?
Right.
So just those things, they're so enriching, and you get out of your own space. Stop thinking about your trauma. You're going to therapy, you're doing the things, you're going to work. If you constantly think about it or are in it all the time, that's what you're feeding yourself.
Yeah.
So
right.
that's really the expansion of it. For me, I did the wellness, I did the yoga, I did the meditation. Those are things that are a part of my life multiple times a day. So find the things that are good for you. Some people crochet, whatever your outlet is, but that doesn't mean sit on the couch for 5 hours and only crochet every day.
Right.
Movement. You got to move your body. You got to be doing the things. You got to be getting together with friends, even if you feel like, you're not confident and you still need to isolate. Those can be good days for you still. Journal, do the things you need to do, but then the next day, make sure you go out, join a local group.
And we desperately need other people connection.
You cannot live in this world without connection. And if people think they can, they're wrong.
Yeah.
We are built for that.
Let's not sugarcoat anything.
That is how civilization was.
Right?
That is how civilization was.
We're meant to be social.
Absolutely. It doesn't mean that you have to be hanging out with groups of people every day. It doesn't mean you have to have a huge social circle. It doesn't mean that, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't mean those things. There's not, things are not black and white. That gray area is, you can't eat too much fast food. You cannot eat it all. You know what I mean? Yeah. Everything in moderation. And when people come from this place of trauma, that perfectionism, no, if I can't do it, I'm not going to do it at all. If I can't do it the right way, if I don't have the right gear, I'm not going to go hiking. No, it's all crap. Stop telling yourself crap.
Right. And if you're an introvert and you think what we're saying isn't true about needing people, go ahead and think about the time you had your introvert friends over at your house and you sat there and didn't even talk to each other, but it felt good to be together.
The energy in the room. It's the energy in the room, even with plants. That's why nature has been proven to help people's mental, capacity. You go out in nature and smell the air. Yeah.
I'm glad you said nature again, because I thought about something when you were talking about hiking and going out in nature. One of the things that I love to be out in the woods, which is tough now because I live in Utah and I have to drive an hour before I can get to woods. But, one of the things that I see in nature, and I think, I don't know, give me your opinion on this, but one of the things that I feel like maybe it just happens naturally, the stuff I see in nature that amazes me and helps me kind of get through stuff sometimes are like broken trees, because they break, they fall over, and sure enough, they'll start growing from that fallen over place, or there's this place I used to hike to up in Idaho, and up at the very top of the mountain, there was this gnarly pine tree that probably wasn't taller than about 6 feet because the wind's always blowing it. And it was misshapen. Well, I say misshapen, it was perfect for up there because the wind was always blowing it and it was always readjusting to the difficult environment. So when I see something like that, I'm like, I love that. I love to see that tree that got broken when another tree fell and hit it, and it started growing again from that broken position. And it just kind of makes me think, man, it doesn't matter how bad, broken, we can keep growing.
Look at all these fires. It decimates, thousands upon thousands of 10,000 acres of land, and then it regrows.
Yeah. Oh, I read that even the area around the Chernobyl, which you're young, you may not know what this is, but it's a nuclear reactor that went really bad in the Soviet Union. And it was a horrible, horrible, horrible disaster, tons of radiation. But now it's a forested area. It's amazing that we can come back from just about anything.
The regeneration. And you know what? That just reminded me, because I said back then it was, for me, it was the beginning of that growth was understanding the science. Something that trauma therapist said to me was the brain is malleable. And you're just constant. Since I was a kid, I was thinking I was broken. My father used to tell me, oh, you live in a fantasy world. You don't know how the real world works. Just things like that. When you're fed that from a very early age, you believe that. I'm not saying my father didn't love me. I'm just saying, he came from, let's talk about generational trauma. Hey, we'll be on here for 2 hours.
Right.
So, that's what was constantly rotating in my brain all the time. It doesn't mean that I wasn't a confident person and I didn't do well in sports and I didn't do well in school. It just means that was the inner dialogue. And so that's what I constantly thought. And when she told me, she's like, no, your brain changes over time. Your brain changes all the time. Your body, your cells regenerate themselves. She's like, every 7 years, you do X, Y, and Z. She's like, the brain is malleable. It will change. And so I really stuck to the science, and I'm like, maybe I'm not broken. Maybe, this is a thing and it's not my fault. You know what I mean? Like, he's done this to other people. It wasn't just me. You know what I mean? Like, what did I do to make this happen? Yeah. What could I possibly do? You try to make sense of it. And that's the thing, just like today, you try to make sense of the violence of war. You try to make sense of, that children are still starving in our country that has mass amounts of food. Like, what? How's that possible? So, really understanding that the brain will change itself was something that I really took to heart back then. And again, that perfectionism still is like, I know this, but why is it so hard for me today? You know what I mean? Like when you have those bad days, or there's tough days. So yeah, the brain can change, and it does.
I guess even in our supposed brokenness, we can end up having a benefit out of it. What's happened to me, that's why I do what I do now. If I had grown up with none of that stuff happening to me as a child, maybe I wouldn't have been a volunteer fireman. Maybe I wouldn't have been a police. Maybe I wouldn't have, done all the things I do to protect people if that hadn't happened to me. Who knows what I would be? I'm not happy that it happened. It was horrible, but because it did, there's some things in my life that are different, and I'm a person that wants to help others now. And I think that happens to a lot of people that get in our head broken.
Yeah.
Because when you know what the darkness is of trauma or whatever kind it is, I think it puts something in us that says we want to help. Not to say that people who haven't dealt with it. I knew a terrific therapist, and I asked her one time, I said, why are you doing this? Did something happen to you? And she said, no, actually, I've never dealt with any kind of trauma. I just wanted to help. And I looked at her, I said, you mean to tell me you came into the dark voluntarily to be with us and help us? So, it amazes me that there are people.
Yeah.
But
let me ask you this. Did you feel like in your trauma, did you feel like you kept getting to a space and then pulled back and then to a space and then pulled back? I called that my invisible hurdle. I'm just curious, did you have that, or do you have that same
Yeah,
similarity?
I still deal with that.
Yeah.
I, and you know, mine, I don't know if I've told you this, but I only started remembering the majority of mine 3 or 4 years ago.
Oh
So
yeah, I can't remember anything before the age of 5 or 6.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because after that happened, looking backwards, I could see some of the challenges I've dealt with over and over. I could see why my circle of friends was more like a circle of friend, and I could see why I connected with women more than I did with men.
Sure.
Abusers were male, although there were women there too. And it's interesting to look back and see all that and to still see it going on today where, I want to have a group of
Yeah.
guy friends to connect with. And there's still the stuff inside of me that
Sure.
puts the big sign over their head. Is this a betrayer?
But that's the thing that kept you safe too. So you have this like interesting relationship with that boundary.
Right.
Like for
And I want
me,
those signs to go away. I want close.
but they shouldn't go away. They're there to protect you. You
Yeah.
have to learn how to work with them. And the reason I asked you that question about like I have the invisible hurdle, my therapist said to me like a year ago, because I have a different therapist now, she's a psychotherapist. She said to me, she's like, maybe you were born to have this difficult life. The universe gave you this life because you're the one that can handle it. You're the one that can deal with it. You've made strategic moves in your life, even though they've been hard and even though they've been challenging. It's made you the person that you are. So what if you just give in to the fact that, and I was like, oh, those nuggets sometimes come and you're just like, because it's all about the perspective, just changing slightly that perspective. And I'm like, huh. And it really helped me this year. And as we were talking before the podcast, the expansion, I stopped calling it growth and I'm calling it expansion because I'm still the person that I am. I still have the same characteristics. I've done growth. I'm in a different space. I'm more advanced now. I understand my boundaries and I know how to work with them, and they've been successful. Not like I'm rating them, but I can feel that they're successful. I told her the other day, I said, I'm not unhappy, but I'm not happy. So I'm still working on that. Again, this is very new to me. About 8 months ago, I'm like, I've never felt lonely. Lonely is a new emotion for me.
Really? Interesting.
Yes, lonely is a new emotion for me because I was like, oh, if I'm feeling bored, I'll go to the movies with a friend or I'll go do something. Lonely is a new emotion for me probably the past 8 months. And I do feel like, going through trauma can make you feel very isolated. You feel like other people haven't gone through it. I don't know how to talk to people because they don't know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? And there are friends. One of my very best friends, she's great, but I can't have these conversations with her because she doesn't even understand anxiety, right? She's like, I've never had an anxiety attack. She's like, so I don't know. And I have great conversations with her. And her husband has major anxiety. So she was telling me when she started her new job back in April, she's just like, oh, when I took my first call, she's like, I started sweating. She's like, I was sitting there. She's like, I just went blank. She's like, I knew this stuff. I go, that's an anxiety attack. You think you don't have an anxiety attack. Guess what? You might not have them as often as other people, but that is an anxiety attack. I said, you have somehow managed those situations in certain ways that you didn't put the 2 and 2 together, where her husband was in the military, so he has anxiety attacks. Anxiety attacks are new for me this past year. Before, like I don't have social anxiety. I'm a social butterfly, but I have I think with that loneliness came anxiety. I'm dealing with different things now than I dealt with in the situational traumas of my abuse, because I'm dealing with more of the childhood stuff now that I never, like I said, I never put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah. Oh,
so that's why I call it expansion.
I want to say, hey, if you're Sarah's therapist and you're watching, I don't think she meant it the way it sounded when she said she's a psychotherapist. I don't think that's what she meant. But well, it's I think it's really neat because when you talked about, wow, we're already at 40 minutes. We're flying through this.
Yeah.
When you were talking about creating a ritual and that, you're a free spirit, so you don't like that idea much. Well,
Yeah.
I'm Sagittarius, which if you know anything about Sagittarius, don't fence me in, except that if I don't have fences, I wander around and get nothing accomplished. But
right.
So it was really neat, as you're talking about rituals, even inside of me, I'm thinking, stuff I got to do every morning but
like task. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. And then your explanation of your rituals were about writing, about not living in a world of black and white, left or right or wrong, about not using words with yourself that you should have, or you were supposed to, or you have to, or you must, and getting outside to get fresh air, to see nature a little bit. I mean, even if you're in the city, you can walk in the park.
Absolutely.
Or have plants in your apartment. I look at those and I'm going, well, geez, the rituals, I'm an old guy from down.
You didn't say golly, you said gee. That's okay.
That all of those things you're talking about, they don't feel restrictive at all. It's like you're saying, oh, be sure to breathe all the way in. Don't just breathe shallow. And to slow down, to breathe deeply. I mean, if those are the rituals you're talking about, the things we do, our daily habits, I mean, I think those are easy to do. They don't feel restrictive. They're not restrictive. And they are about self-respect.
Yes.
And, you probably didn't get self-respect from maybe your family, your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whoever it was. And that's part of why we have hurts. We didn't get the respect one human should, give to another.
Yeah. There's a big elephant there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Respecting yourself, loving yourself, like Sarah said earlier. That's not conceit. Loving yourself isn't conceit, and loving yourself isn't selfish.
Yeah.
It's vital to your own health, to your own transformation back to who you can be from what you were crushed down to be through.
The last thing I heard was when you get crunched down.
Yeah, when you get crunched down, that's part of your expansion to come back to who you were.
Yeah.
Before that person or those people or those experiences squished you down. So yeah, I was just saying, what do you think about that as kind of a summary of what you've been sharing?
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes you even have to go to I like to call it back to basics. Like everyone during the pandemic was just in a space of, we've never dealt with this before. So you were just trying to consume it all and understand it, and you're isolated in your house and you're with your families, or you're alone, or your pets, or whatever. Just taking a shower became like a thing. You're like, I took a shower today. Because you've been in sweatpants or yoga pants for days, and you've been watching the news, and you're like, how do I get, groceries tomorrow? Like, you're just trying to figure it out. So I did index cards. Index cards worked for me, so what did I do today? So this basic is like, I have a facial scrub, you know what I mean? So I don't want to use it every day, because you shouldn't use it every day. You should only use it 3 days a week. So I had a little index card in my bathroom, and I'm like, I wrote down the days that I did it, I like a lot of Ayurvedic traditional remedies. So putting specific oils on your skin or dry brushing your skin is really great, especially if you live in a place that is, has winter months. So I'm like, you don't want to do it before bed because it actually stimulates your cells. So I was like, all right, I have to remember to do it in the morning before I shower, because I can't do it after because my skin. So like, you have all of this stuff in your brain, and I'm going to go back to that freestyle journaling. you can have prompts if that's where it helps you to get started, but like just taking those thoughts out of your head and putting it on paper puts them somewhere and not floating around constantly in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And people like us, where we're constantly trying to figure things out. As children, we were trying to figure out, why don't they love me? Why am I alone? Why am I, in your abuse, you're like, why is this happening to me? What's going on? What do I do next? Getting that stuff out of your head and putting it somewhere else was just amazingly helpful to me. And, throughout all of my years. I have journals. In fact, I just put a box of journals. I asked my therapist, I'm like, what do I do with my journals? I never go back and read them, Cranford. Never.
Yeah. I've got 2 milk crates full of notebooks.
Right. So I'm not using them as a tool to go back and reference. I'm using it as a tool every day or several times a week to just get stuff out, just to get thoughts out. Could people read them? I would want them to, because there are probably things in there I don't want people to read, but sometimes it's a journal entry about what I did today, what I ate, how I'm feeling. I connected with a friend I haven't talked to in a while and it was great. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it contains not much of anything, but it helps me to just get it out. I could do it in the morning. I could do it at night. And then I've added to that over the past 2 years. Like I said, the past 2 years have been my expansion years of dealing with the childhood stuff I didn't realize. So on every mirror in my apartment, there are affirmations. The one in my bedroom, every morning when I wake up, I can see it. I love you, I honor you, I support you. And that's talking to myself. And then the other one, I think in my bathroom, says, you are loved, give and receive love. Just feeling okay with those emotions. And if it's a tough emotion, if it's a negative emotion, let that emotion come. It's not going to stick with you forever. Feelings are transient. You're not going to feel depressed. Those feelings are transient. If you're feeling shame, it'll pass. If you're feeling confused, it'll pass. Those are should flow in and out. Don't let it get stuck. Right. And the third thing, and the third thing would be education. Consume every podcast and every book you can. Not everything works for the same person. People don't connect with yoga. People don't connect with spirituality. People don't connect with certain things. And if that's not your thing, that's fine. You'll find the thing, and
it might be a very similar thing. I mean,
right.
I tell people I'm kind of a self-help book junkie,
Me too.
and in my head, all the self-help books say the same thing in a different way, but occasionally I'll read one and the person will say it differently. I'm like, oh my gosh, I get it. Even though I've read it in 6 other books. Right. Yoga might not be your thing, but one day you might have a yoga instructor that you're like, oh my gosh, they're moving me through, and it's like the old energy is coming out of me, and I don't have to carry it.
I've cried in yoga class and no one can hear me, but something passed through me. And then I've had great days in yoga class where I'm like, oh, I feel great. So every situation, driving in the car, you know what I mean? Like we all know that we've taken those long road trips and cranked up that song that meant something to us and we're just sobbing. Or we've, I just took a solo trip to Banff National Park. And as I'm driving into Banff, I'm looking at a postcard and I'm just like, I have such joy. You know what I mean? Like you just feel it in your body. So like allow yourself to feel. And when you come from trauma, feeling is a very scary thing for you. So
allow yourself to feel good.
Yes.
You don't have
it's such a weird space for people with trauma.
Yeah, you don't have to just do the bad ones. It's okay. Find yourself an old Bugs Bunny cartoon. Watch that thing and laugh.
Yeah. We all laugh at the holiday commercials. We all, laugh at Home Alone. We all cry at the coffee commercial. You know what I mean? Like, we're human. We're no different than any other person. It doesn't matter what they've been through. We're all human, and that doesn't change, at all.
You have to remind your heart that there's stuff besides pain and depression and anxiety.
Yes.
Yeah. So find somebody you can laugh with, find somebody that will sing with you. Or if you can't, put a speaker in the bathroom, shut the door, crank
Always
it up,
have music on.
and let it rip.
Yep. And that thing you said about nature too, which I really loved, because you know how much I love nature. If you break down, like, I said to you, I woke up and I had a ceiling. It's so simplistic. Who's waking up every day saying, I'm so thankful for the house over my head? Most people don't think about that, When I'm in nature, everything around me is living, breathing, moving, consuming, providing for each other. And you don't think about that. You're like, that rotting tree that fell over is now food for the worms. And, like, you don't think about those things, but, the condensation in the air. Oh, I think we froze again.
Oh, you're frozen, but I can hear you. There you are.
There we go. Okay, we're back.
I heard everything you said.
Oh, now I have no sound. Hang on. So I look at those things and I'm just fascinated by them now, whereas I would have never thought about that before. As much as I did love nature, and I've always loved nature, that tree that fell down is now food for the worms, and the condensation is feeding the rivers, and we climate change, you start thinking about that, and it's like it will regenerate itself. I'm not saying we don't need to do something about it. I'm just saying, you know what I mean? Don't put me in that. Don't fence me in there. I 100%. I'm, I lived in California. I don't use plastic paper. I'm very good when it comes to that. I even have a composter in my kitchen. So I'm huge into those things. But break down the molecular stuff of your everyday, and it helps you be in the present. Yeah. What do I smell? What do I hear? What do I see?
Especially if you're having an anxiety thing. I mean, that's
100%.
That's a pretty standard way to help yourself get out of either an anxiety attack or a dissociative event.
Yeah.
To reconnect with right here, right now. What do I feel? What do I feel in my hands? What do I feel in my breath? What can I see around my room? To come back to present. I read a pretty neat thing that said if you're in depression, you're stuck in the past. If you're in anxiety, 100%. You're stuck in the future.
Yeah, you're thinking about the future.
Come right back to the middle of being in the present. So
I would tell you, if anybody, everyone that's listening or who this goes out to, one of the most beneficial books I read a little over 2 years ago was The 4 Agreements. And so when someone doesn't call me back, or doesn't text me back, or doesn't respond to my email, I don't take it personally. If they haven't called me in a while, I don't take it personally. I have no idea what's going on in their life right now. Maybe work got more busy. Maybe one of their kids has been ill. Like, I just don't take things personally anymore. You know what I mean? And really understanding who I am in this different space. Like you said, you're starting to remember things now. You're a different person now. You know what I mean? So it's like relearning yourself. That's been a cool space for me lately.
Well, all right, Sara, thank you for being here. I so appreciate you sharing your story, and you shook up my box about rituals, and I like that. So thank you for that. Yeah, it's been terrific having you here. I sure appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much. It's been great. It's always a pleasure talking with you and connecting on these things and sharing it with everyone on the cast and anybody that can get a nugget of information, or if it helps one person, it's always worth it.
So true. So true. Everybody, hey, thanks for being here. I sure appreciate you showing up live when you do, and I appreciate you clicking into the recording. And yeah, please do share. Remember, when you comment, it might be that somebody else that's reading it has heard something from you that can change their life. So, that's how we can all be part of the solutions. Share your thoughts, share your feelings, put something in the comments to support the others that are watching and listening. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
This has been a production of LabCalf LLC and FemVincible.com.